Research shows that mental illnesses are common in the United States, affecting tens of millions of people every year. Estimates suggest that only half of people with mental illnesses receive treatment. In fact, the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, reports that 57.8 million adults live with some form of mental illness. It's a tragedy facing America, and sadly one that's been worsened by the actions and inactions of lawmakers over the years. And so today our guest is clinical psychiatrist Alice Feller, who's worked in psychiatric hospitals, outpatient clinics, substance abuse programs, and in private practice. Dr. Feller's worked as an expert witness and consulted to the Medical Board of California regarding physicians impaired by substance use disorder. Her life's work was shaped in part from growing up with a father with serious mental illness. Her book, American Madness: Fighting for Patients in a Broken Mental Health System, was published by Rowan and Littlefield in May. It's a clinical memoir that brings the reader into the world of serious mental illness using patient vignettes and personal accounts of her work, drawn from medical school, hospital wards, private practice, public clinics, and beyond, spanning a career from the 1970s to the present. Dr. Feller, thanks so much for joining us on the Lean to the Left podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure. Tell us, to begin with, how did your father's mental illness inspire you to do psychiatry?
I think that, of course, it was such an important thing in our family. It affected all of our family more than any other illness.
Sure.
And so it seemed really important to me. Mm-hmm. And I felt these are my people. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed psychiatry a lot.
Okay. Was there any specific incident that occurred when you were at home with your family that really triggered this? Or was it just a kind of a general thing that occurred as time went on?
It was general as time went on. And also there was an incident when I was about 9 where my father, who kept a lot of guns, his gun collection was growing. And he was paranoid and often rageful. He threatened to start shooting. And so our mother grabbed us and whisked us across the street to a neighbor lady's house. And that was scary.
And that was an incident that somehow you thought, I need to do something about this, or what?
At that point, I was 9 years old. I didn't think I could do anything about it, but
sure.
It's certainly what I wanted to do was to get my mother to take us kids and leave.
Okay.
That would have been good.
Okay. But she wouldn't do that? Okay. All right. I need to know, you say that today's jails and prisons have replaced most of our psychiatric hospitals, and that 90% of inpatient treatment for serious mental illness is in prison. Why is that? And what are the implications both for those who need help and society at large, Dr. Feller?
The reason that we've shifted from hospitals to jails is that the hospitals are closed down starting in the 60s. Partly because of the IMD exclusion, which is a little known law that says you can't use Medicaid dollars to pay for patient care if that care is in a psychiatric hospital. So it's a very discriminatory law, and it means that the county or the state or whatever has to bear the entire burden of that care, which is unlike any other medical care.
So that was something that Congress did back in the 60s?
Yes, 1965.
Why?
When they created Medicaid.
When they created Medicaid. Was that some kind of political deal or what? Do you know?
I've heard different stories about it, but the most recent one is that they didn't want to spend so much money. It was going to take a huge amount of money to start Medicaid, and they wanted to cut it back somehow. And so there were two populations that were prime candidates to be cut out of it, and that was people with serious mental illness, hospital care, people in jail.
That just sounds like a brilliant decision by Congress, but Probably not surprising. Oh man. And so their solution to save money was to let people who really needed help just dangle and not have any help. Is that basically it?
That is it. Although there was a dispute about whether these people really needed help, because there was a dispute on the left in Berkeley, certainly, and places like that, about whether mental illness was real or whether
Really?
it was just a judgment call by the authorities or the doctors, labeling people as mentally ill when really they were just a little bit different.
I just find that amazing. Was there any particular villain back then that led this charge, or do you know, or
Oh yeah, sure, I can name villains.
who were they?
First
Who were they?
one,
Let's talk about it.
first one was Thomas Szasz, who
Yeah.
wrote a book that was very influential around Berkeley and when I was coming up, called The Myth of Mental Illness.
Okay.
And I don't know that many people read it, but it was the idea that mental illness was a myth just
Okay.
became, you had to think that. And then the
Uh-huh.
next thing that happened that was much more popular was the making of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from the book by Ken Kesey.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie showed inpatient psychiatry treatment as just basically torture, worse than jail.
Okay.
And yeah, so that helped. It helped Ronald Reagan close down the hospitals.
Okay. So Ronald Reagan was the culprit.
I wouldn't say he was the culprit, but
Okay.
he wanted to save money and save
Yeah.
taxpayers and all that stuff.
Huh. Okay. Now, what needs to change then, do you think?
First off, we need to abolish the IMD exclusion,
All right.
stop discriminating against people with serious mental illness.
Um,
Second, we need to rebuild our facilities and provide beds for people so they don't. As it is, what happens is there are so few beds in mental hospitals that people who are severely psychotic and often dangerous to themselves or others and unable to provide for themselves, they can't get in the hospital. So they go into the ER for maybe a day or so, and then they get discharged out to the
yeah.
streets.
Yeah.
And they end up
Okay.
living on the streets, or when, for one reason or another, they get picked up by the police and put in jail.
So that's where a lot of the homeless people come from.
I wouldn't say, no, I wouldn't even say a
No,
majority,
no,
but a large number. Yeah.
large number. Yeah. Okay. I imagine that racism and chemical dependency have a lot to do with all of this, right?
Racism makes it worse, of course.
Mm.
You're much less likely to be getting good care if
Right.
you're a person of color.
Yeah.
And chemical dependency is intertwined with serious mental illness often.
Is it? Yeah.
Sometimes people become ill and then they self-medicate with
Right.
drugs that make them feel good right away, usually meth and the opiates.
Okay. So, well, it's just such a big topic. It really is. What's the experience for a person with serious mental illness? What do they go through?
Right,
It's
right.
tough.
So we talk about two major illnesses as being
Uh,
serious mental illness. One is bipolar disorder with psychotic symptoms,
all right.
like, and the other is schizophrenia, which actually is less common, but I think it accounts for more of the people on the street anyway.
Okay.
And the experience of those two is different. Sometimes people have a combination of both, and we just say they're schizoaffective. But people with bipolar disorder, it's a mood disorder. So people have an exaggerated good mood, which in the beginning is high confidence and booming energy and,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
very outgoing and really nice to be with. And that kind of tips over into being irritable, unable to sleep,
Uh-huh.
and starting to be irrational.
Okay.
Schizophrenia is different. We call it a thought disorder. And the problem with that is people become psychotic. They cannot figure out whether the voices they hear are real people or whether it's something in their head. And usually it feels like real people because the voices they hear, which are the main hallucinations, are so real. They feel just as real, they sound just as real as our voices. And so it's hard to make up your mind that you have this illness. This is creating that you have a brain illness now, and that's creating these voices. There are a lot of other symptoms too, but that's one of the main ones.
Okay. Now, for families and caregivers who are trying to help loved ones with these types of illnesses, what difficulties do they face?
The families that I talk with, I'm a member of a family advocacy group. So I hear a lot from the families, and I heard a lot when I was in practice, the patients who, if they were lucky enough, their families would bring them to the clinic. It's a huge burden. It is a full-time occupation trying to take care of someone with a serious psychotic, especially paranoid mental illness. And it's heartbreaking. The kid will leave and disappear, and the mothers, usually it's the mothers, will go out with a flashlight and look in the dark corners of the streets for their kid. It's excruciating for them. When occasionally people with this illness begin to feel that the people closest to them actually have been replaced by aliens or imposters. And that's dangerous because sometimes, and it's not that frequent, but I know of several situations. So the person who's having this delusion that their parents or their girlfriend has been replaced by an alien, go after the aliens, and they can kill them and still be looking for the real parent or the real girlfriend.
Wow, it's incredible.
It's called the Capgras syndrome.
Okay. Addiction and serious mental illness go hand in hand. So we talked a little bit about that. You said that in many cases, people find themselves becoming addicted to drugs in order to cope with these issues. What are some of are you talking about drugs like heroin and those kinds of drugs, or what are you talking about?
Sometimes heroin, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes fentanyl.
Yeah. With fentanyl, it seems like it's just becoming more and more popular, and the problem with fentanyl getting much more serious. Is that a growing problem that you see?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, we certainly didn't have this.
What do you think needs to be done about that?
I think a whole lot of different things. Better treatment for people with substance use disorders, certainly, like inpatient treatment, which again runs up against the IMD exclusion because you can't use Medicaid to pay for inpatient drug and alcohol treatment. And I don't know about how I feel about the law enforcement angle, but I think there's something to really trying to track down the dealers and make sure that they're off the street and out of business.
Yeah. Okay. So why is early intervention so important?
Well, it's really important for people with schizophrenia. If you intervene properly early enough, you can actually stop the illness in its tracks and help someone get back using the medication and using everything they learned in their therapy and with their families, helps them get back to work or back to school and back into real life, which is amazing. I mean, we could do it for everyone. We could do that for everyone. But you have to start very quickly, within weeks of the first psychotic episode. So that's hard.
Now, what form does this intervention take place?
So there's 4 basic things. This is a protocol that was tested at NIMH and found to be significantly more useful, especially if it was started early enough. So the 4 basic services are voc rehab to get someone back into school or work, family involvement to let the parents or the family come in and talk with the clinicians, come in with their kid. People usually, so it's people come down with this illness usually in the late teens or early 20s. So often they are still living with their family. Also, long-term therapy, good therapy, like once a week therapy, helping people to cope with the fact that they have this illness.
Right.
And then finally, psychiatric care, good long-term devoted psychiatric care where you can see your patient every week and you can talk to them and see how they're doing, and they can talk to you, see how you're doing. It's a lot to ask of someone to take an antipsychotic drug.
Yeah.
Or, for one reason, for one thing, these drugs have side effects that are unpleasant often.
Yeah.
And also the meaning of it. The meaning is that you have a brain disorder and now you need drugs for your brain disorder. That's a very hard thing to swallow.
Yeah.
So you have to meet with your patient on a regular basis and frequently so that you can sit together and see, like, how did this change work for you? Did it help to stop the voices? Are you feeling stiff? Are you feeling nothing? Is it making you sleepy during the day or not? And you work with your patient over weeks and months to make sure that you get the most effective medication. There's a lot of different antipsychotics, so you have a lot to choose from, and they're different in their side effect profiles. So you want the most effective medication with the fewest side effects at the lowest dose.
Okay. What's the cost to society for not treating serious mental illness effectively?
I don't know the numbers, but
Yeah.
we think that people who are disabled by these illnesses will need a lifetime of support. They'll be on SSI for total disability, and that starts when they're young and then goes to the end of their life. It means that we're funding jails for all the people who used to be, almost all the people who used to be in hospitals. And they're not getting good treatment that really will help them with the illness in the jails. It means that we're paying for homeless services in places where we have a lot of homelessness. And also the police costs. The city of Berkeley spends about a third of its time with mental health calls. The cops, the policemen out on the streets.
Is that where you live?
Yeah, Berkeley, right.
Okay. Now, your book offers some solutions, right? Tell us about that.
Okay. I have 12 ideas.
Okay.
I might not be able to remember all of them offhand, but first I think we should get rid of the IMD exclusion.
Okay, what's that stand for, by the way, IMB?
Sure, it's Institute of Mental Disease.
Okay.
That's any hospital that is more than 50% dedicated to serious mental illness.
Okay.
So I would abolish the IMD exclusion.
Right.
I would institute early intervention with the NIMH protocol everywhere. I would make it completely available to everyone, and I would make a huge effort to educate people, teachers and counselors and therapists, on what early psychosis looks like, so people can think about it and identify it, or send someone for a better evaluation. I think we ought to change HIPAA so that do you know what HIPAA is?
Yeah, why don't you explain what that stands for?
Okay, so it's health insurance portability and accountability something. I forget what the last A stands for, but basically it means that you can send a medical record, which is electronic these days. You can send it to the insurance company or Medi-Cal, Medicaid, but people interpret it as every bit of clinical information has to be kept secret. You can't. And people interpret it that you can't even listen to, say, families, which is terrible. We can always listen to families, and we need to listen to families.
Yeah.
So I would incorporate family as appropriate. I would change the curriculum for all the programs we have that train people to be therapists. I would change the curriculum so that it includes enough experience and teaching about severe mental illness. I would want people to get firsthand experience, hands-on experience with people who suffer from severe mental illness. And if we had enough good training sites, we could actually place students the way they're placed in other things. And that's about 5. I can't, oh yeah. And we also, there's other things that are a little more subtle.
Okay.
In California, we have to put all our mental health money through, that comes through from the main source. We have to put it into nonprofit agencies.
Okay.
And that means you have all these different little nonprofits, none of which really have a stake in speaking to each other, and everyone has a stake in getting their funding renewed.
Right.
And it means that our care is very disjointed. We often have no way of speaking to other people who've seen our patients and could very well help us. Someone who looks like they're schizophrenic could actually be suffering from bipolar disorder.
Right.
And if you saw in their medical history long periods of high functioning, keeping a job and having family and so on, you would think, okay, this is not schizophrenia. We should think about bipolar disorder. And the reason that's really important is because they take different medications. Oh, and just one more thing.
Okay.
I would really strive for a climate of collaboration, and
Okay.
which we don't really have. And
When you say collaboration, by whom?
collaboration between clinicians.
Okay.
Often in the clinics where I worked in most recently, people didn't seem to have a common mission. They didn't feel as if they had a common mission. The caseworkers were in charge of getting adequate food and housing and everything for their clients. And we, the doctors, were in charge of medication, but there wasn't any connection. And there's a huge connection between those things. Anyway.
Yeah, that sounds like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So where can people find your book, and how can they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me on my website, which is alicefellermd.com.
Okay.
And they can then read about the book, and they can find the book on many different places, but Amazon is probably the place to start.
Okay.
And you can read a couple of chapters, the first couple chapters, and you can read reviews, and you can, find out what about it.
I saw that you have hard copy, hardcover. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Paper cover, paperback, and an ebook, right?
That's right.
Very good. Very cool. All right. Have you got anything else you'd like to add?
I'd like it if everyone read my book.
Yeah.
And we could start a movement, a political movement to turn this around.
All right. Okay. Hey, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Lean to the Left video and that you found it interesting and informative. Please visit on a regular basis and check out our interviews with guests on topics that focus on progressive politics and the important social issues of our time. Now, our interview shows stream on Mondays with special episodes on Thursdays. And you can check out upcoming shows, guests, and topics at podcast.leantotheleft.net. Subscribe to our audio version there and to our video shows here at YouTube. And follow us on social media. Facebook at Bob Gaddy and the Lean to the Left podcast. Now, it's 2. Bob Gaddy is one Facebook page, and the Lean to the Left podcast is a second Facebook page. Twitter at Lean to the Left 1, Instagram at Lean to the Left 1, TikTok at Lean to the Left, LinkedIn at Bob Gaddy, and YouTube at Lean to the Left. Now, I hope you'll support Lean to the Left as well so we can keep things going. Just click on the Donate tab at the top of the leantotheleft.net homepage and contribute by buying me a cup of coffee. That'll really help and would be much, much, much appreciated. Now, this is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left. Thanks for sharing your time with us.